Chair thanks the gentleman. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Oregon, Representative Hoyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here today. A few things, we have a lot of fires, ice storms, floods that have gotten more and more severe. This year, we've had 1.9 million acres of land that was burnt with fires, and that is over twice the 10-year average. But as things are getting hotter and drier and climate is getting more extreme, some of my colleagues want to argue about why, but what I want to say is the fact of the matter is FEMA is set up for when natural disasters happen every once in a while, maybe every 6 months. And so you have a lot of temporary Stafford Act employees. Is it true that 4/5 of your employees are in that temporary Stafford Act category?
Ma'am, can you repeat the number that you said?
4/5. My understanding is 20,000 out of your 25,000 employees are in that. Is that
I
inaccurate?
believe that would be high. I believe about half of our workforce, maybe a little bit more than half, are direct employees out of the Disaster Relief Fund and support disasters directly. The rest support our steady state missions.
Okay, so half of your employees, and the fact is this has become a full-time job. I represent a lot of rural communities. I've never seen a difference between how FEMA treats my rural conservative areas and my more blue areas. And it seems like you had an employee that acted inappropriately, unethically, in an untrustworthy manner, and then lied about who, apparently, according to the facts that we know so far, lied about who was responsible for that, right?
We had a single employee that took actions that were unacceptable by directing her team to avoid homes.
Right. I just think that if you have an employee that acts in an unethical manner, it follows that maybe they're not telling the truth. But again, I've never seen any difference. And I'm going to go on to a different subject because I do represent Oregon. We had 23 fires in mid-July at the same time, earlier than we'd ever have fires, 23 incident command centers, just following a massive ice storm. We had floods. We have, our rangeland, our ranchers, our farms that were burnt. Now we have a mix of federal and state and private land. And our governor has asked for President Biden to approve a major disaster declaration for wildfire and storm damage between July 10th and September 7th. Our requests include public assistance for our 6 frontier counties, Gillum, Grant, Jefferson, Umatilla, Wasco, and Wheeler. Hazard mitigation grant programs to support projects that reduce the impact of future disasters, and a state cost-sharing waiver, waiving the state's cost for emergency work in response to this disaster. This has been the most expensive fire season ever, and what it seems like is FEMA is looking at each of these fires individually, when really what we would like to see is for all of these to be taken together, because that's how we had to manage it. So when can this, and if you have to get back to me, I understand because this isn't a committee hearing on this, but when can the state reasonably expect a response to the disaster declaration request? We have our farmers and ranchers that are really, really struggling, have lost everything, and they really need this help.
Congresswoman, we did receive that request from the governor, I believe, on October 21st. And I recognize and know how important this is to you. I will certainly go back and follow up with my team to see where it's at in the process, and we'll get back with your staff.
Okay, and then the disaster declaration process often feels slow to affected communities, and we've had this again. blue and red districts. And I do think that your agency has a giant job and doesn't necessarily always have the resources to do it. How can FEMA streamline the steps between the agency receiving a disaster declaration request and submitting a recommendation to the president?
You know, the biggest thing that we see is really at the capacity of the state and local level and whether or not they have the resources to be able to quickly and effectively determine the amount of damage and submit that paperwork. We've been increasing our support by putting what we call FEMA integration team members and embedding staff right with state offices so they can assist with that process. We have 10 regions and a regional administrator over each of them that have great relationships with the state directors and work very closely with them to help them understand what the steps are, where they need to go, and to work through and provide technical assistance as needed.
We're over time. What I will say is these are cash-strapped rural counties that lost a lot of their economic engine when the timber industry crashed. And so they're doing the best they can, but what I would say is we really need to figure out how to get these answers quicker, and thank you for your response.
Happy to work with you on that.